Thank you all for coming today. My name is Liz Mason. I'm a GIS analyst with the Department of Information Technology, and I do the majority of my work for shellfish sanitation. As a bit of an outline for today, we're going to cover kind of what shellfish sanitation and recreational water quality is, provide a little bit of background about the data that we're collecting, and a little bit of information about why it's complicated. The Growing Areas Program, historical data collection, how we transition to field maps data collection, and then I'll do a small demonstration. Get started. So, shellfish sanitation and recreational water quality is a section within the Division of Marine Fisheries. And within that section, there are two different groups, so shellfish sanitation and recreational water quality. What I'm going to focus on today is specifically shellfish sanitation. And it's essentially a public health agency that deals with certifying that any shellfish harvested or processed in North Carolina are safe for human consumption. And I don't want to get too into the weeds of my marine biology background, but to provide reasons why that's important is that shellfish are filter feeders. They can filter anywhere from 20 to 25 gallons of water in a day. And basically when they do that, they concentrate all the toxins that are in the water. And then if you eat that, that's bad. So we want to make sure that that's not happening to any shellfish consumed in North Carolina or that were harvested there. Basically what that is done through our Growing Areas program. So we have 5 shoreline surveyors and 4 water samplers that cover all 49 growing areas in the entire coast of North Carolina. So if you look here, the dark blue means it's open and you can harvest there. The red means that it's closed and you cannot. And then if we zoom in, pardon my trackpad usage, you can see some light blue, which means it's sometimes open, and then you see some pink, which means it's sometimes closed. And that depends on the water quality testing and other factors, but they change slightly more frequently than the dark red and the blue. So our water quality samplers will go out and they sample each growing area 6 times a year with random sampling, and there's more than 1 station per growing area. So we end up with about 7,000 samples a year. And then we move on to our shoreline sampling, which is what I'm actually talking to today about. Close out of this, there we go. So we have 5 shoreline surveyors. We have 2 in Wilmington, 2 in the central region in Beaufort, Moorhead area, and then we have 1 up in the northern region. And what shoreline surveying is essentially an in-field evaluation of any potential or actual pollution sources. And we're using those to understand the impact that those on-land sources are having on the water quality and the shellfish in the area. So we have some samples, or some examples of those. So all the way on the left, you can see that's a marina. Marinas are required to have closures around them all the time, mandated federally. But what we will check at marinas is basically how waste and gas are handled there, how many boats are stored there, how many boats have heads or bathrooms on them, things like that. You want to make sure that they're handled appropriately. And then we also use that information to determine how wide that closure area should be around the marina. So it's very important information that they're getting. Next in the middle there, you have a stormwater drain. And we basically count the number of stormwater drains to understand how much water is flowing into the growing area and how that could be impacting the shellfish. Next, we have in the middle here some lovely little animals. We want to kind of understand how many wildlife animals as well as domestic animals are in an area. If it's domestic, we understand an actual number and then how that waste is treated in the area. For wildlife, we just kind of do our best and be like, there's a lot of swans that gather here because obviously their waste can run off into the growing areas. Then we have new subdivisions. So subdivisions are indicators of growth. Basically, the more people there are, the more pollutants there might be. Subdivisions are also congregations of stormwater drains, potential waste from pets, and then also things like fertilizers are all concentrated in one area. And then we can move on to wastewater. So there's several different types of wastewater facilities that we inspect, and we inspect everything from the actual wastewater treatment plant to the pump station, which is basically taking water from a home or a business and actually getting it to the treatment plant. We want to kind of test everything in between to make sure that all of those things are functioning properly, and then also understand that if things do not function properly, how we go about closures, what needs to be closed, and how that works. So some of our wastewater treatment plants will actually pump their treated water that is perfectly safe into the estuaries. However, we do want to make sure that if that does fail, if the water is not treated properly, what that means. And then another type of wastewater is septic. So this is clearly a septic system that is not functioning properly and needs to be addressed. We need to understand those. So we'll do on-site visits and talk with homeowners and kind of have those conversations with them, maybe see from the road, kind of talk to them, what we can tell. We check for gray water, and then if there's any actual just like waste dumping on site as well. Then we have golf courses. So a lot of golf courses will actually use treated wastewater as part of their irrigation system, but we will also, it's kind of an important area, concentrated area for fertilizer and other chemicals as well. So we want to make sure that we keep record of those. And then the last kind of catch-all pollution source that we're looking at is what's called an area of concern. It's basically something that doesn't fit into all of these other categories, but that we still want to make record of. So if there's something like a derelict boat after a hurricane, or if there's a dump site that people are using even though it's not meant to be, we want to keep track of that so we can either inform the appropriate people or that we just keep record of knowing that if that grows or if the boat never leaves and it starts leaking oil, those types of things, that we have a record of how long it's been there. So you can tell there's a wide variety of data, and there's a lot of different things that are recorded with each type of data that make it quite a complicated data set that we're working with. This map that I have here, it's going to show a time lapse of data, but I want to point out that it's not necessarily saying that our data started in 2004 or that it started with such a sparse amount of data. What I'm doing with the time lapse is just basically showing you, because a lot of it's stacked on top of each other. When I say it's a concentrated area, it makes no sense because it's the entire coast of North Carolina, and that sounds absurd. But really what it is because we're sampling a lot of the same points, they kind of get stacked. So when you watch this time lapse, don't necessarily think of like, oh, they went from no data to a ton of data. It's more of just so you can see how it shows up and then recognizing that it's kind of layered on top of each other. Because if I just showed you basically what shows up here at the end, you don't have as quite of a depth of understanding of how much data is truly there. So the pink points are the animal points, yellow are area of concerns, orange is wastewater, dark blue is docks and marinas, red is golf courses, green are subdivisions, and blue is stormwater points. So if you zoom in down here, again, I apologize for my trackpad usage. I'm used to using a mouse. So if this goes poorly, bear with me. There we go. So these 2 points here, what I kind of mentioned earlier, is the kind of difference in the points. So we'll look at one subdivision point, maybe. There we go. And you can see the type of data that we're collecting. So you can see the name of the campground, which we're using as a subdivision. You can see, is it densely populated? Is it growing? The number of lots? Things like that. That's very specific information to a subdivision. And then we come down in here and see a picture of our lovely subdivision. Then right across the street, we see a stormwater point. And you can see in here the vast difference in the amount of data and the type of data that we're collecting. So you're looking and saying, what's the land use land cover? Is it open or closed? What's the conveyance? How big is the pipe that they're using? All these types of things that are not fully what I take care of. But you can see that there's a vast amount of difference in what we're collecting. There was a picture in this one, and now it's gone. But you can see the difference in the two pictures, or in the two different types of data that we're collecting, and why it was kind of complicated to go from our traditional way of collecting data to our modernized way. So at the end of all of that, our data is shared with county officials or state regulators that can actually help with any regulatory needs that are necessary. And then the pollution source data is combined with the water quality data and made into a report. And this is just a figure from one of those reports that basically shows all the pollution source points as well as the closure areas in the area and helps decide if those closure areas need to change or be updated or are fine the way that they are. So, all that being said, how this was originally collected was very slow and very cumbersome and needed to be updated. So we'll cover that first. Originally, staff would actually spend a lot of time beforehand printing out paper maps because it was difficult to navigate with the Trimble. So they spent a lot of time in the office beforehand, kind of looking at paper maps, taking them with them, deciding where they wanted to go, and doing research kind of on a desktop to understand where they were going. And then they had a handheld Trimble that they would go into they would go into the field with their paper map and a Trimble and say, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. I feel pretty good about it. And hope that they were in the right spot and hope that they were collecting the same point that had been sampled last time, which is a lot of finger crossing for what's supposed to be a little bit better, more accurate than that. And then the other cumbersome part was that they were taking pictures on a handheld digital camera, and then they would have to come back into the office and match up the digital camera pictures to the points that they took on the Trimble, and that was a pain. So they just took a lot of time and was inefficient and super frustrating because you had to be like, did I remember? Is this the right time? Was this the right picture? Where did it go? And that got super frustrating. So 2017, 2018, decided to update that workflow. And started with collector, but it has turned us into field maps, very similar process. So I'll just refer to everything as field maps because it basically was. So basically what we're going to do is update our workflow to include iPads and to use field maps. And what this did was basically we took all that data that I showed you and put it into a database on ArcGIS Online. and then we're able to make a field maps application from that. So our staff can open that application and go straight to the point that they're interested in. They can download an offline map with a growing area that they're interested, and it also has all the historical data points right there. So they can access not only the data point that they're going to just from last year, but we have data points back from 2004 that you saw, and they include pictures, they include data, so you can see, has it changed? Is it different, or is it exactly the same? And that's good news. So it's decreased time in the office beforehand. We don't have paper maps anymore, which is super nice. It's also decreased time in the field. They're much more efficient going to find those points and can get in and get out. We're also not taking digital cameras anymore. You can use an iPad, take a picture, and attach it immediately, or attach it later if you want to. If you said, oh, I forgot, I took a picture, you can very easily go in and just do a quick edit, attach a new photo, and move on your merry way, which is much, much nicer. You also have more access to other people's data, so you can see basically across the entire state. You get home from the day, you sync all your data, you upload it to ArcGIS Online, and you can see what the person up in Manio versus what the person down in Wilmington was doing today, which is convenient for our shoreliners, but also really nice for our supervisors. The other thing that we'll add, which is not specifically field maps, but is a nice thing, whoop, trackpad, it got me. There we go. The other thing that we have is a nice tool. It does say 2020 data. That's not right. It's 2023 data. It's just the title of the map. But basically, it can query here. So you can look and say, I've been working on growing area F5, and I want to understand how many animal points have I done from that. So it gives basically control of the data back to the shoreliners that have been collecting it and have a better understanding of the data, as opposed to me, who was not really there, and I have no idea what you collected and what you didn't. So it gives the control back to them, which is what we really want. So I realize that's separate than field maps, but it is a nice part of having everything on ArcGIS Online. Okay, and then we'll do a quick demonstration video. I've opened it twice now, haven't I? Okay. I'll make it a little bit bigger. I'm gonna try and talk my way through it at the speed that I did. So this is right around Morehead City. This is where our main office for DMF is. And what we're gonna do, you can see all the different color points, and what we're going to do is zoom into right near our office, and we're gonna take a look at a wastewater point. I'm gonna zoom to the middle of the screen. It's kind of the right to the red one that you're looking at. And you can see where it says wastewater 170. That's basically the identifying number for the wastewater point. So 170 will stay the same forever. But you can see the years change, and that basically indicates that that's all the historical records for those points. So I made this test point, and I deleted a lot of the information because it was proprietary. People's phone numbers that I didn't necessarily feel like I should be sharing on YouTube. But you can see all that information is normally filled out and there. And our shoreliners can just go ahead and take a look at everything. You also look and say there's photos attached, and you can look and say, oh, they were doing construction on this wastewater treatment plant last year. Now, if you say we need to do an updated point, you can just go to where it says copy, and you can do copy all. So that copies all your attributes and your geometry, so you're collecting a point in the exact same location. We confirm that it's a wastewater point, and then we can drop down and change what we need to from these attributes. We've locked the ones that don't need to be changed, where I said like wastewater 70, but then we changed, whoop, I went too slow. There we go, I knew it was gonna happen. Okay, go back, maybe 10 seconds, we'll see how it does. There we go. So we don't want to change where it says SGA index 170. That's the identifying number. So we've locked it so that our users can't accidentally make a change. But where it says SGA ID, that's where we actually change the year. So we want them to be able to change that and update it as they need to. There we go. And then a lot of these really do stay the same. So it's not something that our shoreliners need to have to change, but we want to give them the freedom to if they need to. So for this instance, I am not the central shoreliner. We're going to pretend that I'm someone else. So we said see other. You can change the date to today super easily, in my case, yesterday. And then again, most of these would normally be filled out, but I've just deleted the information in them so that it wasn't available on YouTube. And then we get down to the bottom where we have our comments section. And you guys are gonna watch me misspell surveyor. Please don't judge me. It autocorrects too, which is a nice feature that I wasn't trying to point out, but it did. I paused for a second. It was great. But yeah, so basically you can put your own comments in here, whether that has to do with who's the surveyor, in this instance, me, or anything else. And then we can come back up to the top and you can attach a photo. In this instance, I'm just gonna attach a photo that was in my iPad library, say attach, and then we're good to go. We kind of double check, scroll back through, and then you can say submit up in the top right corner, and you're good to go. So it's a much faster process than what was previously done with the paper maps and the hoping that you got the point correct. I talked to one shoreliner, she said it probably saved her about a month or two of time just having this workflow, which is a bit hard to quantify because it's not like she's just sitting at her desk twiddling her thumbs now. It actually gives her the ability to be more comprehensive in her research, find more things, collect more data. And so in the end, that's actually more beneficial because we're getting better information about the growing area and the water quality in the growing area and providing better information for the people in North Carolina either harvesting or eating shellfish. So I talk really fast. I'm done a little early. But if you have any questions, you can feel free to send me an email or ask them now. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Do you have anybody that wants to, when they do the inspection,
Mm-hmm.
that they want to create a report out of that? They've got a team doing that and publish it to, have you done any of that?
I don't think we have. To the best of my knowledge, so all of our information is technically public, but we also, like, some of it's not, just because it is like people's phone numbers and some of it's people's housing information. But to the best of my knowledge, are you asking like if somebody working for Shellfish Sanitation wants to make a report out of it or somebody external?
Employees, like they want to document that particular inspection in a different format than.
Yeah, other than the sanitary survey report, which is essentially, I took out the one thing I could have showed you. So this figure right here is the report that is based, it's a figure, well, of course now it's not gonna load. So we do have, there we go. So this is one figure from a report that we make. It's required by the FDA. And it happens every 3 years that we make these big reports, submit it to the FDA, and it's basically the Shellfish Sanitation's rationale and explanation for why the closures are the way that they are. So that is the larger report. As far as anything that's particular, like a smaller report about a particular incident, not that I'm aware of, but that would be more like, because we're non-regulatory when it comes to like wastewater, that's more of a communication with like county officials that are regulatory, that would maybe be, as we can provide the information and say, we saw this, have fun, good luck, but it's not necessarily in our jurisdiction to actually do anything about it. Yeah. So it's not something that we have done. So North Carolina is a little different in that our leasing program is separate than our shellfish sanitation program. So they are, while obviously there's a lot of communication, there's two separate kind of people that are making those decisions, but we do have lots of communication about what pollution sources are where, and then these locations and this pollution is obviously factored into whether those leasing programs, like a site is allowed to have shellfish harvesting done there. But so DMF does the leasing as well, but it's just a separate section within DMF.
Okay.
So we have the sanitation section, which is us, and then we have an actual like shellfish leasing section as well. You're welcome to speak on it because he's going to whisper about it. Anybody else? Yeah. There's and there's like some leasing tools. Basically, if you're interested in starting a lease, you can go online and look at like a leasing tool and decide, put in a request, can I harvest here? Kind of all that leasing information, which is not my area of expertise. I will fully own that. I talk really fast. I'm very sorry. Do you guys have any other questions?
I'll ask one more.
Okay, sure.
So I noticed in field maps you're using forms.
Yeah.
Did you look at using survey 1, 2, 3? Is it easier to build? I've never built. Did you compare the potential for doing both?
So my personal opinion versus the Survey 123 versus field maps is that because we want our staff to be able to navigate to a point, our main application should be map-centric, which is why field maps made the most sense. If you want them to, basically in my head, if you're like, please go out and survey all the trees you can find, you don't necessarily know where all the trees are. So you want to say, when you're at a tree, take a point. But because we want them and we say we have current points that we already know what you want to navigate to, go ahead and start with a map. Now, obviously you can take a new point, and that's still very easy to do in field maps, but because most of our initial surveys are beginning with revisiting old points, we want to navigate, and that's a little bit easier to do. You can do it in Survey 123, but I personally don't find it quite as user-friendly. Yeah. Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate it.